Hey folks, happy Cinco de Mayo. Uh, we are talking about Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 10, Farewell. We are going to give our spoiler free reviews of this season finale, and then we are going to get into a spoiler breakdown of the episode starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Nathan.
I am Colin.
And I'm Chandra.
Hey, so this episode is written by Akiva Goldsman and Christopher Monfette, is directed by Micah Weaver. The spoiler-free logline provided to us by Paramount is, with just hours until the Europa Launch, Picard and crew find themselves in a race against time to save the future. So, Colin, what did you think of this episode?
This episode was pretty good, actually. I mean, there were definitely some things that were missing that they kind of. It's kind of like when you're talking about sticking the landing and things like that. I think that they did stick the landing, but it was okay. It wasn't like great. It was like a perfect 10 or anything like that. But they did stick the landing. It was passable. It got It got a high score, and they did do some nice things to it, and I really did appreciate them doing that. There was a really nice moment between two characters that I really did appreciate, and also a very surprise appearance of another character, which was also very interesting. Have some complaints about that, but we'll get to that when we get to the spoiler part. But overall, I did enjoy it, so I didn't really have really high expectations after what had happened in the middle episodes, as I talked about. And even in the penultimate episode, I was like, oh, this is okay, but it's not great. But they did a pretty good job, I just have to say, and I was pleasantly surprised in many ways. So yeah, I would definitely recommend you go watch it and just enjoy it for what it is, and not expect too much. Yeah.
Contra, what did you think?
I mean, it was a really fast-paced episode, right? They packed in a lot because I think they left so many things
Plot
hanging,
threads, yeah, to the last episode.
like
Yeah.
across the season, right? And so they had to fill it in, which I think helped sort of make it feel. I enjoyed it, right? Like it was great because there was now so much going on, whereas before I think the previous episodes it just kind of plodded along a little bit, but they tied up some loose ends and created some new threads. And yeah, so there was really some tender moments, surprise appearance. Although I expected him to show up, or hoped he would show up.
Okay.
But yeah, I thought it was a nice finish to the season. They certainly ended on a high note, a higher note than than I expected, and I think definitely at least left me wondering about season 3 because now it's not a neatly wrapped up story, which I'm perfectly fine with, right? It's like, okay, there's gonna, and we knew they wrapped up filming season 3, and so yeah, I like the way it ended, and curious to see what happens next.
Yeah, I like the episode. I feel like my watching Strange New Worlds first put me in a better mood for watching this episode. So I probably was more favorable to this episode than I would have been if I reversed the order. Um, yeah, it was a good wrap up to basically a mess of a season. The season was a mess, and they did the best that they could, trying to wrap everything up, given all the unforced errors that they made in the last 9 episodes. So I mean, I feel like a kind of damning with fake praise, and let me turn some of that stuff off because, like I said, I was just doing a Strange New World. So yeah, it was a good episode. They wrapped up most of the storylines. They were just, I mean, they couldn't wrap up from where they were going, or where they all the episodes that led into this, there was just too much nonsense to make this episode like superb. But it was good given what they had. I mean, they added a little bit more nonsense that we can talk about during the spoiler section. But all in all, I enjoyed the episode for some of the emotional beats that they embedded in this. I feel like the emotional beats would have been stronger if this was a 5-episode season instead of a 10-episode season. Everything has been attenuated because they stretched this across 10 episodes, which I've said before. I'm kind of a broken record at this point about that. But there were a lot of nice little beats between characters. Some of them more successful than others, but I appreciated what they did here and there. I feel like some of those beats weren't necessarily earned by this season. They were earned by your previous affiliation, your previous knowledge of TNG. There wasn't much in this season to earn those emotional beats, but I still appreciated them as a TNG fan. So I mean, all in all, I think I would give this episode, not the season. We'll have a separate conversation, maybe a separate recording about the season. I'll give this episode probably an 8 out of 10. It's not great. It's not even like very good, but it's good. It's a good solid episode. If I were to say about this season in general, you probably don't have to watch anything except for this episode, really, because there's like a recap at the beginning of this episode that goes through all the pertinent things that you need to understand for this episode at the beginning of this episode. I don't think that you really need to watch any. I mean, I like the second episode, and I'll still say I like the second episode. I don't know that you really need to watch the first episode now that I'm thinking about it in retrospect. I just like the second episode because of the world building that they did in that episode. But yeah. But
yeah, one thing about that is that is it kind of weird that you know that you're saying, honestly, to be honest with you, and this is probably a little spoilery, but like you could actually just watch the first episode and then go right to the last episode. Yeah, you really could.
There's
honestly,
nothing
you really could,
really.
And then just like be like done with it. You're like, okay, we're done.
You don't really even have to really watch the first episode. Honestly, you don't. Honestly, if you given that they have a recap at the beginning of the last episode, you really only have to watch the last episode. There isn't much of substance that has happened through the entire season. So the 3-minute recap that they give you at the beginning of the beginning of this episode is sufficient for you to get all the highlights of the episode. They go through. And this is not spoiling anything because I'm just going to go through what they go through, which is just previous episodes. They go through the Borg Queen at the beginning. They go through the fact that she's playing music, and I think they even mention that she says "look up" or something like that. They show the dystopian future. They show Q, the confrontation with Q. They show Elnor died. They show all the things that you need to know to make this episode make sense. You don't really need to watch any of the other episodes, and it would be a kind of a waste of your time to watch any of the other episodes, in my opinion.
Oh, that's
so.
So we get into spoilers then.
Yeah. So let's get into spoilers. Any guys? Have any other thoughts about the episode spoiler free before we jump into this?
No, let's get into it. Cool.
Okay. All right, so all right, spoilers ahead. I will say before that, if you're enjoying the conversation, for what it is, please join the conversation by commenting down below. Like and subscribe and follow to help us out. We really appreciate it. And with that, spoilers ahead. All right, so what do you guys want to talk about?
Well, where they left off, pretty much. I mean, they kind of left off. It's like, oh, we got work to do. and then that was it from the fun. They basically just like picked up right from there, and then they did just because we were wondering like what's going to happen to them now. It's like, and I think you did speculate that Q was going to get involved to try to get them back, and that did happen. But it was like you're left hanging to figure out like what's going to happen with them now that they're stranded in 2024 and Jurati took the ship away. Yeah. You're like, what's going to happen? So it was kind of getting into that, and then he was so gosh darn confident about it. He's like, we just got work to do, and like just kind of like brushed off the thing that you're stranded here.
I think and they have the conversation at the very beginning that they basically resign themselves to just staying in this era, right? They're going to stay in this era, but they want to make sure that they save the future. So I think the mission is coming first. They'll and they have that they talk about this in this conversation. It's mostly about let's save Renee, and then we'll worry about ourselves later on. Which makes sense because the ship is gone, but they're more important things than their comfort and their ability to go back to the 21st century. So let me see. Yeah, so that's where they are. Second, let me. Colin, you are all the way in the corner there.
Yeah. So this was.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no! Like they do jump right into it, and you sort of see the moment between Picard and Tallinn, where like trying coming to an understanding, or she comes to the realization of what it is. Yeah, the two Renees.
Which we speculated last week was his nephew, which might have been better writing, but that would be, but you can't really expect that from this season.
But how I didn't watch your review, but how would his nephew
his name was Renee.
His name was Renee.
His nephew's name was Renee, and he did the way that I kind of rationalized it was that he, in the original timeline, to restore the timeline, he had to die. Like he had to die because he died in a fire, and it was addressed in Generations, the movie Generations. So that's where I thought that Jurati / the Borg Queen was getting at, was like, okay, in order to restore this timeline, Renee Picard in the past, Picard's ancestor, would be the one to survive and discover these great things, and Renee Picard, like his nephew, has to die like to restore the original timeline. That's what I thought it was going to be. If they
could have come up with something interesting, honestly, it would have been another thing that they didn't develop well enough. So I guess it's fine that they didn't bring in yet another thing, because he only really touched on it at the very beginning in episode 1 when he gave that speech about him being the last Picard. So if they depended on you remembering the speech from episode 1 about him being wistful about being the last Picard to bring in something about his nephew, that would have been just as weak as a lot of other things that they just like dropped, like the ice thing and like the butterflies that they were supposed to be concerned about, even though they're killing people left and right. So it would have been another not well developed. It would have been another not well developed plot thread. So I guess Laris being the other Renee is fine. I think it was unnecessarily cryptic at the end of the last episode to make you think, what's going to happen? It's like, but it wasn't all that interesting to solve for that. Like,
I mean, basically what she did was just do the Scarlett Johansson thing, take off the mask.
Well, yeah, I mean, they established earlier on in the season that she has the ability to change her appearance because of what she does with her ears. But yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they decide the break-into teams. She says she's going to go to Renee, and then Picard just jumps into the thing with her, the transporter with her.
Yeah, with her.
And so the first good part of this episode was the speech that she gives to him. So here, she says, he asked me what are you going to do. She says my job. The specifics here.
Yeah, I mean, just basically like telling him she like she they're
Right.
gonna have to make sacrifices to complete this mission, right? At this point, and I mean, in a sense, they've already made the sacrifice with giving the ship to Jurati and resigning themselves to be there. So yeah, I like this was this was a touching moment, like knocking some sense because he still is very resistant and not wanting to deal with his with any loss. No matter.
Yeah, so she says here, I've seen the heart of this in you, but other people's lives aren't up to you, and their deaths aren't and your deaths aren't your fault. Not if mine comes, not your mother's. That's a fantasy, Jean-Luc. Yeah, well, she was very much. It was a very well delivered little speech that she gave him here.
Definitely.
Yeah, we can't control who we lose. Yeah, of
course.
And he's just it's funny because he's supposed to be like 90 years old, and this is just something that he's carried with himself for his entire life. She also says that I think in the same speech that I'm sure the way you carrying this with you has helped you like save worlds, but like you need to let it go or something like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a definitely a highlight of the season. I feel like again they didn't need 10 episodes to tell us that, but it was definitely a good speech, one of the better speeches of the season. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one question that I do have is that if what audiences would they have been like really into it if it was, say, for example, was like a 3-part event. Yeah. Star Trek Picard, 3-part event.
I think
and then like be in this type of story where it's like much more compact and you can tell the story really tightly, and then it's like a beginning, middle, and end. Whereas this is like you said in the beginning, the non-spoiler part, where it's dragged out, and it's like, why are we sitting through this? And would audiences have accepted that?
Yeah, I think they. I think.
Go ahead. I feel. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, I feel like this show is like sort of just a whole farewell tour for Picard, right? And we're getting more insight into a character that's very loved. And I think we talked about this before. There are parts of it that they certainly could have drawn out more, right? So when we see that dystopian, the alternative future, spending a couple episodes there probably would have been great. And I think that maybe connecting, because I think what they were trying to do when Rios got arrested by ICE was just sort of show the type of world that we were descending into, right? That dysfunction. And I think they just didn't really fully develop the ideas. So it still could have been 10 episodes, but I think they could have spent more time telling the stories more clearly. I would have enjoyed seeing more of Guinan, right? More of that. The story with the FBI agent was actually kind of nice.
They never
could have been had they sort of
they never used them again.
Right. Had they sort of told the story differently, I could have even seen that like being like not a standalone episode, but like maybe more telling fully the story of this man who was traumatized as a child because he, happened upon aliens in the woods and spent his whole career, like sort of like a little vignette and adding that like to the story. So there were moments, and I think it just sort of kind of fell flat because they were trying to do a lot and not really building or helping like the audience make the connection, right? Because we know like the time we're in is messed up, right? A lot of crazy things happening, and you sort of, and I think they're sort of trying to draw the parallels between current time and that dystopian future that we see, right? Because they're battling it out. Soong is battling it out with Rene Picard, right? Because those are the two paths. We can have this very xenophobic future or the Star Trek future that we all know and love, right? And I don't think they sort of did a good job of really they're crystallizing like that. Those are the two paths that we could be on, and making that obvious.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would have watched a 3-part account too.
I think that what you said about the ice thing, and I know you're working really hard to like you're being very, very kind to them. And
no, I mean I think it's relevant, right? Because you saw in that future where they were just like destroying other
and I think that what you're saying is true. I just don't think that they connected those dots in.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
But that could be the case for like the ice thing is one thing, but you could say that for so many different things this season. They didn't connect the dots on, which is bad writing.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
and also to go to your point, Chandra, is that if they were going to do that, like follow the ice, which I disagree with, because I thought that was a pointless exercise, and I expressed that.
It was
in our previous reviews.
So
I think it was.
It wasn't a pointless exercise. They only made it a pointless exercise because they didn't do anything with it. They could have actually said something about the dystopian future that we're like Chandra said. We're marching towards because we're being inhumane to each other.
Sure.
They could have said something about it. They didn't.
And if you
go ahead.
And if the audience kind of show the audience, not tell them, but to show them the progression of that instead of like shortcutting it and things like that, then it would have been much more compelling. And then it would be like, okay, we now understand why these choices were made. But I think that they had to take away from the Soong part of it, and I think that would have been great if they just took that away, honestly, and took away the Corey part, because it's just like if you're going to do that, then just do that. And that's actually, I think we all three of us would agree with that would be really, really a brilliant type of story. But then you had to include the genetic part of it, and I don't know why they did that. Is it because of the eugenics war? I'm not sure. I have no clue as to why they did that, and maybe they're trying to set something up with Khan, because you saw the folder confidential and stuff like that. Yeah. I don't know why they did that. Just for that purpose, I don't get it.
They could have cut.
It was a very roundabout way of doing it, and I think you could have. I agree that they could have gotten rid of the Corey story, because that I forget which episode it was, but where you saw the university board or whatever firing him or reprimanding him and referencing his work with soldiers, right? And then you see presumably those soldiers, those super soldiers that he worked with, show up for the Borg Queen. I think that would have been sufficient to say that he's been actively working on genetically enhancing humans and making them tougher, stronger, whatever, right? That would have been enough to show that he was working towards this idea of superior people,
so almost,
right? Yeah. The whole Corey.
It's almost like an Easter egg type of thing, more so than like, this is a nice, fun Easter egg for you to like dwell upon. Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely do.
And I still don't understand what Q's interest in Soong was, because ultimately Q helped them get back. When throughout the season you sort of thought Q was trying to be a foil, or he was just like being Q and capricious and selfish and trying to make things more difficult for the sake of like this lesson that he wants to teach Picard, right? So that also just didn't make a whole lot of sense, because he was
something that you
really
can say
tender
over and
with
over again
Picard
about
at the
this
end.
season. Did make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So they did that.
So that threw me off for a loop, because it's like he was like very, like you said, Connor, like very tender and like, oh, even gods have their favorites and stuff. I mean, this was actually one of my favorite parts of the episode. Was that interaction?
It made no sense with the rest of the season.
It made no sense with the rest of the season. Exactly my point.
It made sense. It made sense with TNG, which is like what I was saying. Yes. What I was saying at the beginning when I said it wasn't earned by this season. It was earned by your knowledge of TNG. That scene makes sense within your knowledge of TNG and all the interactions that they had, but not from the season. Yeah. I don't know. We're talking for.
I will say I think I told you guys before. Like I think Q was probably like my least favorite. I just did not like the whole idea of having this, like very powerful godlike being in the show. But this is, I think, my favorite sort of iteration or presentation.
At the very end.
At the end was still just like. No, like this in this season, right? But then at the very end, I was still like, I mean, he just snapped his fingers and took him back to the future. So it's like in his sort of dying moment, right? He used his last bit of energy or whatever to get them back.
Yeah.
To where they needed to be. But still I still like get like frustrated with that, like what it represents. Right, what Q sort of represents, and he says, even gods have their favorite, right? And it's like, why?
Do you dislike Q because he presents as a god? He's not a god. He just says that he's a god.
But he acts. I mean, he does things, right, that are completely unknowable, right? He plays with people,
right? But even Picard doesn't think he's a god. He just
in a very capricious and godlike way, right? If you look at the plots of our stories, and I don't know. I just feel like it was a plot device somebody came up with to do very fanciful things, which is fine, but it doesn't do it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in any of Star Trek actually. I mean, he goes around acting like he's a god, but I think everyone that he interacts with on the TNG crew, on Voyager's crew, on DS9 just acknowledges him as a alien who obviously has either has evolved past where they have or has technology that they don't understand. I think of him just like I do think of, and he's not the only character like that in Star Trek. There's a lot of like just super advanced beings where what they're doing is almost like magic to the rest of humanity. I think I'm thinking of like,
and I think it's what they choose to do with their powers, right? Like they just do stupidness. I'm like, what? Like, why are we playing these games? Like, is that what? When you're an all-powerful being, are you that bored that you just have to play these games with like lesser evolved or less powerful beings?
I think you're right, Condra. That's the point. I think that's the point of who he is. If I think that with him, he's bored. I mean, if you look at all the previous episodes in TNG and also trying to prove a point, maybe.
I never thought of him as bored. I always thought of him as thinking that he knew better. And acting like a god, it's like you never know his entire plan. His plan is unknowable to you because he can think in a different way than, or they've evolved to a certain point of evolution that actually explaining his plan in a linear way wouldn't necessarily be clear to humans. And I sort of understand them trying to do it this season. Like, I don't know that he needed to put Picard through all of this to get him to reconcile his memories with his mother. But I do understand sort of what he was coming from at the very beginning, because Picard is arrogant and he's also stubborn and he's 90 years old. And if he hasn't reconciled this memory in his with himself by now, you probably had to do something extreme. I don't know if you needed to go this extreme. Like destroyed.
But did you? He was on his vineyard making wine. Let him make wine. That's sort of just like it. Just I don't know. Like I said, I'm just like why?
He was on his
Why
vineyard
just
bit making wine, and he
wine?
was fine. But he also didn't want him to like die alone. Like he's
That's
going to
true.
die alone because of his hangups, and he was never going to he was never going to get out of his own way because of that hang up, because he's lived with that hang up for almost like 80 years of his life, right? There's a certain point with adults, like I have this conversation with my siblings about parents, like at a certain point they're not going to change. You need something like extreme for them to change. Like
yeah,
shock them out of their bad habits.
So
I mean, I think it is very interesting in that there was that kind of almost epiphany and almost revelation that Q did not want Picard to, like you said, die alone. I think that he wanted to give him this chance in order to live a life that he did not have. But yes, that was probably the lesson that he was trying to give him. But does it have to be this long, though? The lesson,
yeah.
And dramatic.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, but he's always been dramatic. Yeah. I don't know that we needed to string it out over. I don't even necessarily. I don't even necessarily have an issue with him creating a dystopian future or whatever, because I mean that's sort of Q's flair for the dramatic. I mean, at the end of the TNG, he almost destroyed the entire universe to make a point.
Right.
To make a point. So like, but we didn't need to stretch it out over 10 episodes.
No,
we could have done it in 5 or 3.
Yeah.
But also, you got the impression that Q wasn't in complete control, right? And then again, at the end, it seems like he did have. I mean, he had sufficient, I guess, or maybe he was
trying to save his power for that.
Right, save his power. Yeah. Yeah.
So he like things. Yeah. He was trying to save his power for that.
But then why have that interaction with Soong? That like what Condra said, like why? Like what's the purpose of that?
Yeah,
I'm not trying to drag it out.
I'm not trying to explain like the obvious issues of the season. Soong and Corey could have been cut out of the season. There was no reason to have them in the season whatsoever. If he had to work indirectly, he could have worked indirectly with like faceless people that we didn't necessarily know, or he could have just been used his knowledge to like show up to places and just keep putting obstacles in their path instead of using someone else. The writers wanted to use Brett Spiner. The writers wanted to have Issa Briones in this season. So they added this convoluted subplot that made no sense and didn't really contribute to the season and could have been cut out. And it would have had, and if they were going to go with 10 episodes, like Condra said, they could have spent more time making Rios' story make sense. Like actually not just dropping the ice subplot and actually making it make sense, making the fact that he was a Starfleet captain and he decided to stay back in time make sense, but it didn't. Like they had to spend all this time with Corey and Adam Soong. They could have made the Elnor and Rafi thing be more impactful. They could have made the Seven thing be more impactful. But yeah.
Instead of them standing around in the
yeah, I mean, right. Because I think what like each of those things could have been an episode sort of unto itself, right, where you sort of explored that theme. Because like Rios could have been in ICE detention for an episode, right? Like let that sort of linger, or let that if it was or whatever be more difficult. Like they just
or like him or give him a speech where he's like, I need to stay back here. I saw this injustice and I feel like I could actually be useful here. I'm a man out of time. He said a little thing about I'm a man out of time, but he didn't really elaborate on why he's a man out of time because he didn't have any time. at this point, they're trying to cram everything into the last episode, where they could have just cut some crap in the previous episodes and given him that speech, or given him some speeches throughout the season. So like, it's inevitable that he's going to stay. It's not inevitable that he's going to stay because it makes sense logically. It's inevitable he's going to stay just because they keep having these weird cutesy moments with him and the Doctor. And again, I don't dislike that actress, but that love story wasn't well written, so I wasn't invested in it. It wasn't well written.
But it was obvious that he was going to stay. I mean,
it was obvious. It was obvious that the writers wanted him to stay. It wasn't obvious for the character. They didn't write the character beats well enough that it was obvious that he wanted to stay. They didn't have him say enough or do enough for it to be obvious. And it would have been simple to do that. Like you said, Condra, he could have been spent more time in ice. He could have seen more injustice and actually felt like he wanted to stay to help, right? And this is the partner that he wanted to stay with to help because he was inspired by her and what she does. I mean, he mentions here or there that Go ahead.
Yeah, instead of guiding, telling the story and giving the exposition.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna tell you instead of showing you what happened to Rios.
Well, yeah.
Oh boy.
They.
And the same for Seven and Rafi, because I mean, I actually enjoyed their moments, their comedic moments, and like them sort of figuring stuff out together, a little bickering back and forth, right? But even that
could have been fleshed out. It could have been fleshed out more. Yes. So like the Rios had the least to do, and got the most. I'm so angry about Rios. Like they had a Latino captain, and they just left him in the 21st century. They could have given Rios a spin-off show. That's how much potential Rios. I'm so angry about Rios and what they did with him. Anyway,
maybe they'll give you a 7-9 show. They'll give you a 7-9 show as captain.
I like Jeri Ryan, but she's a white woman. We've had a white woman captain. Having a Latino captain would have been cool.
Or a captain.
Huh? Yeah.
Or a captain.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Borg are aligned now.
Especially a Latino captain with his sort of sensibilities. He's kind of like swagger, swashbuckling, kind of like laid back, cigar chomping sensibilities. It's a different kind of leadership than we've seen before. He's an interesting character. They made me want to see more about him in the first season, and then they didn't care about him this entire second season. They I don't know. I'm sure that guy, he wants to get work, but I'd like to get him alone with a beer and just try to pick his brain about how he felt he got screwed over this season. Like he could have been, like I said, he could have had a spin-off show. And
coincidentally, it's his birthday today.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's his birthday. Santiago.
Yeah. Birthday is today. I don't know. If you want to see him
happy birthday, Santiago.
Utilized a little bit better, he's also in the flight attendant this season.
He is.
They're not using him. They're not using him as much. They're not using him much this season in the show either. But they're using him more than they are in this show, and he's only showed up in a couple episodes. What his parts make more sense. He has more to say and more to do. But yeah. All right.
How would you have felt if Teresa and her son had gone to the future?
I don't know. I feel like I feel like it would have made no sense because she had actual vital work that she was doing there for the community. I think that would have that like a lot of things in the season wouldn't have made sense, but I think I would have been better. I would have liked it. It
would have made less sense than him staying.
No, his staying doesn't make sense either. But it would have made less sense.
But in the hierarchy.
It would have made less sense, but there was no reason for him to say, because, like I said, they didn't spend. They instead of actually writing a compelling love story that people were actually interested in, they just had him like starstruck. He's like goo goo over her for no reason whatsoever that's clear. I feel like he comes from like the 24th century where there are far less restrictions on women. I'm sure he's met quite a few extraordinary women in his life. She's awesome, but seriously, he comes from the 24th century. So I don't know.
Love is love. You can't, it's like what Barty McFly said, it strikes you like lightning. So what can you say,
Yeah.
Love is love.
Actually, 25th century. I think they're
25th century.
25th century. He's from the 25th century. So like, I keep saying this like I don't like the actress. I like the actress. I like what she did. She's a very interesting person. He's a very interesting person. They didn't sell me on their chemistry at all together. Like,
yeah.
So
well, I think the kid, it's probably he wanted to stay because of the kid too. The kid, they had some good moments though. The kid,
sure, sure,
they did. Yeah.
Again, all of these people make sense independently. They don't necessarily make sense together. The kid had some cute moments. He's cute. I understand the appeal of him. I don't see my giving up 400 years of progress for him to 400 years of progress for him to. Anyway, what else do we want to talk about? I like I said, I'm just gonna get angry because like I said, I like the episode. I'm gonna get angry if I continue talking about Rios.
Right.
So
I guess we can back up a little bit. So Tallinn. This moment with Corey
where she wipes out,
where she has magically shoes and has found a library and is now hacking into her father's system and deleting his files. I guess which will temporarily.
It won't let him recreate her again. But I mean, I don't know if I feel like this is confidential funding report. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever because the eugenics wars were in the 90s, unless they're retconning things, and I don't think they're retconning things. Was it just called Project Con because he was fascinated by Con? It sort of doesn't make any sense. His ancestor ends up doing things with augments in Star Trek Enterprise, so maybe that's what they're hinting at here. So I don't know. I think after this is where we get our special guests. I thought this was Q, and I'm sure the audience is meant to think that this is Q as well. But it's not Q. It is Wesley Crusher as a traveler. Some people hated this. Some people liked it. It was fine. I was I don't know that I like it because it was a good scene. I like it because I like him, and he's just so giddy about Star Trek, and he's just so purely happy to be part of the Star Trek universe. So I'm happy for him. Similar to LaCondra saying that she was happy for I forget the politician off the top of my head. Stacey, you were happy for Stacey. I'm happy for him. I don't think the scene is very well acted or anything, but I think I'm happy for him. I'm happy that they didn't have to connect the travelers to the people who put Gary 7 and Tallinn on the world, but it was a cool thing that they did there, connecting them together. So yeah.
I don't have any problem with this at all either. I think that it was pretty cool that they kind of tied in TNG here. What happened to Wesley and things like that. However, if you saw Nemesis, the last TNG movie, he's in the wedding. So is he a traveler or a Starfleet officer? He was in uniform, so I don't get that part.
I mean,
that really irritated me because
I don't really have a big issue. I mean, Nemesis wasn't a great movie in the first place, but
yeah,
I just assumed he was just checking in on his mom, and he was he was there as a guest. You know, he has regular clothes on here, so he can put on a dress uniform if he wanted to, because he was part of Starfleet. It is a little weird that he was in a dress uniform because, you know, he left Starfleet. He should have just been in he should have just been in a suit. But I feel like that's a minor issue given all the other issues with that movie. there are a lot of issues with that movie. But you could just explain it away by him just like visiting his mom, and it's unclear what the Traveler's powers are, but they almost seem to be like on par with the Q Continuum, but they're less assholes about it. So I mean, he could probably, just like Q, show up with any clothes that he wants to at this point, with the power of math or whatever. If you remember from those episodes, he just understood the universe at a higher level because of, you know, he saw the underlying math behind everything, and he was able to like whatever. So I don't know.
Here's another question that I have is that if, you know, we find out that Corey is going to go with Wesley, you know, to, you know, wherever they're going to go. So why didn't Corey intervene with Soji and Daj in season 1? Like, what's the reasoning behind that?
They sort of in this scene, he does mention that they try to make subtle changes. That's why they put watchers on planets. They don't intervene in large ways like that. So it's not clear to me if he's recruiting her as a watcher, or as a traveler, because he does say a traveler, or as a watcher, like Tallinn was, or like Gary Seven was. I think she's extraordinary and she's smart, but I don't think, even in these scenes that we've seen her be as extraordinary as Wesley Crusher was. So I don't know.
It's unclear. It really didn't make any sense to me. I mean, again, Corey could have been like cut out the whole season, you know, and things like that. So it's like it's just kind of convenient that we're not going to leave Corey here. We're just going to have Wesley kind of take her along, and then like be whatever she's going to be, traveler or watcher. And then, you know, Adam Soong is now okay. We kind of conveniently wrap up Adam Soong's kind of thing here with the fact that he's probably going to create some type of genetic modification human with Khan and things like, we just conveniently do that. One other thing is that going back to Renee Picard, we kind of barely touched on that. It's like kind of conveniently I've tied it in a bow, like, she's just going to go to space. And we spent so much time in the middle episodes talking about her, but then it's like, we're done with her now.
We spend so much time talking about her, but very little time actually with her. She's only in 2 episodes. She's in like 2 episodes. Like the entire reason that we went back in time is to save her, apparently, and they don't use like these are more things that they could have expounded on if they cut Corey and Soong out of the show.
I could see like an episode again where you see talent, like you see Renee growing up and doing these things, and talent
that would have been cool. And actually,
I mean, I love that conversation. And I said, like, I love that conversation that Renee and Tallinn had, where Tallinn has to convince her that she's a friend, right? And it's like telling her these intimate moments from her life that only somebody who was there could have observed it. And we realize like it's all to get her, you know, to trust her so she can take her place in sorts to deceive Soong. But like sort of like building up that relationship where, you know, because up to this point Tallinn had never spoken to Renee, like they'd never had a one-on-one conversation, but she's dedicated so much of her life to making sure she makes this mission. And they
told instead of show. I think this scene
Yeah.
This scene following the speech that she gave Picard would have had much more of an impact if they actually showed, like you said, a flashback of her actually following her since childhood, a scene actually depicting what she's talking about in this scene. It would have hit harder. I appreciate what they were trying to do here, but I would have appreciated it more had they actually laid the groundwork for it and done the work earlier in the season instead of wasting our time with other things that they didn't need to waste our time with.
You mean staying around the gala?
I mean, the gala, all kinds of things in this season. They wasted our time with this. It was like 10 hours of television, guys. Like, do you feel like your time wasn't wasted a lot in those 10 hours? It's 10 hours of your life.
It was.
It's 10 hours of your life you're not getting back, and like.
Yeah, it was a waste. I think with the exception of, like you said, with the exception of the first episode maybe, and also the second episode, like you could probably skip all the rest of it. I mean, with the Jurati Borg Queen stuff was pretty cool. Like that you could probably just keep,
but I don't know,
along if you want to watch that. But still,
maybe someone does a supercut of just the Jurati Borg Queen stuff, and then you can watch that.
Yeah.
I mean, since I watched it anyway, what I'll do is maybe I'll make a supercut of it and post it on.
I was gonna say, like, the evolution of Jurati into the Borg Queen, I think, was probably
it makes no goddamn sense. Like it's nonsense. It's more nonsense. Like where they left, where they left at the end makes no sense. But like the scenes are acted very well. The scenes are acted very well. It's very compelling. It's very interesting. And that's only one of the only interesting things that happened in this season. But the time travel, they didn't. The time travel thing in this episode in this season, it annoys me
problematic
a little bit less than the Rios thing. Like the Rios thing is the top thing, but like I mean the Rios thing also has some time travel stuff. Like why like he had no impact whatsoever to the timeline. But the time travel stuff in general, they killed all these people who were just Borg drones, but apparently they didn't have any children of significance that would have affected anything. Also, it's possible, and that's like a low level issue, right? But a higher level issue is that we have almost 20 years of continuity with the Borg being an antagonist. And if she went to the Delta Quadrant and created another Borg collective, are we supposed to believe that she created a separate collective that just didn't interact with the other collective for like 400 years and evolved in a completely separate way, and also created a collective and never interacted with the other collective, or are we supposed to believe that
they're on different wavelengths.
Or are we supposed to believe that this was the Borg collective? If this is the Borg collective, then all the things that happen in TNG, all the things that happen in Voyager didn't happen. So like it's not clear because it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Makes no sense.
Yeah. So you say that all of that did not make sense, that all of that did not happen to any of them? Yeah. So Jurati was the one actually pulling the strings behind Locutus and and Janeway getting assimilated. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well she was or she was being purposely she purposefully enslaved a bunch of people for like 400 years and then changed her ways for the last 5 years so that she didn't screw up with the timeline. It makes, like I said, it makes no sense. It's nonsense. So like trying to make it make sense.
Yeah. But I think your first theory is plausible, right? Because space is huge, and if they're not
sure,
if it's a different collective and they don't.
Space is huge. Our galaxy is huge. But if that is the case, go to a different galaxy so you definitely don't go run into the other Borg. Don't go to the Delta Quadrant where the Borg originated, because that's gonna that's going to increase your likelihood of bumping into the other Borg collective if you go to the place that where it started. I don't know. It's yes, that makes the most sense, but it's still nonsense. It's the most it's the only solution that doesn't screw up the timeline in a lot of ways, but it's nonsense. And further nonsense is at the beginning of the season, she was on the bridge and then she was gone. Rios was on the bridge and then they were gone. It makes no sense.
Somebody noticed though that crew member was like, "Where's Captain Rios?" He's in the back.
It makes no sense. If they fix the timeline, nothing that they did should have nothing that happened should have actually happened. I could have been okay with the fact that there were two Rioses now, one from the aborted timeline and one from the timeline that was corrected. So there are two Rioses and there are two Juratis. But it makes no sense that there's only one Jurati and one Rios, because those Rios, that Rios and that Jurati only exist because the timeline was screwed up. And now the timeline isn't screwed up. Again, more nonsense. more nonsense. I
don't know that, because if they leave, Jurati isn't gonna come back.
What I'm saying to you is that the reason that the totalitarian timeline was created was because of the Renee not getting on that ship. Once Renee got on that ship, there was no reason for that totalitarian timeline to be created. Remember, the totalitarian timeline is where they left the future to go to the past. So it would erase the totalitarian timeline, then they never went back to the past in the first place. It also and earlier on in the season, when I was giving this show more grace, and remember when I was going to say this show is like heart garbage, and then I pulled back from that with the Guinan thing. They said that she didn't remember him because the timelines changed, right? So now the timelines are back in place. The timeline is back in place. Now, does she remember him from 18 whatever, and also from 2024? Because she gives a download. She remembers him from 2024, but she shouldn't remember him from 2024 because none of that should have actually happened because they fixed the problem. It, like I said, nonsense. It makes no sense.
Well, maybe some things happened, some things did not happen. It's just like Back to the Future, it's just like that.
Listen.
It's a
all
different
of this stuff
timeline.
is. I mean, the rules.
But this is why you don't play with time travel, right? Because things don't get fixed.
This is why you figure out what your time travel rules are before you start writing them and actually paying people to show up on set. You have to figure out how. None of this stuff, all of this stuff is made up, right? If we were talking about fantasy, all of it is made up. The way you get your audience to invest in the storytelling is you get the rules right, so that they can just understand the rules of the universe that you're creating, and then just sit back and let the show or the movie or the book unfold, understanding the rules. But if nothing makes sense, why invest your time or your energy in the universe that they're creating, right? So
yeah, one other thing that Ashley from the Renee Picard stuff is that she discovered an organism on Io that basically solved climate change. Wow.
Yeah.
What an interesting plot device. A magic wand to solve all of our problems.
Which the writers are not really interested in exploring or talking about. Because, I mean...
Yeah.
I feel like they have forgotten that this show is supposed to be a sci-fi show.
Yeah.
Make something up to make, like, they don't care about the time travel stuff. I understand it's supposed to be a character study of Picard and all the things are going to revolve around Picard, but Picard lives in a sci-fi science fiction future, so you can't like pretend like none of that exists now that we're focusing on this character.
Yeah, you're right. You're very right about that, Nathan. Is that, you know, a lot of the TNG stuff that we talk about, like tricorders, like computer access, video conferencing, all those other things. These are ideas that were born from people that were watching TNG or were inspired by TNG to develop that type of technology. I don't see any of that happening here. There's none of that type of inspiration to like say to us that, oh, maybe this can be possible. Like, we talk about transporters, we talk about warp drive. Yeah, people are still trying to figure that out. And yes, the physics of, I read the book, The Physics of Star Trek, and they said that, warp drive is kind of nearly impossible unless you bend the laws of physics. But at least, people are still trying to.
So is transporters as well.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So is transporters.
Yeah.
But the thing is that you're even, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the smaller things like tricorders and like devices like that, where touch pads, like we have touch pads now because of that. So it's just, I think that you science fiction does inspire people to get involved in STEM and also get involved in these types of research, and I think that that's the piece that's really missing in a show like this.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that's what. So that's not my gripe. My gripe is that they're just not consistent. Like you just now said, transporters aren't a thing that we will probably ever figure out.
Yeah,
but the writers of TOS and TNG spent a lot of time explaining all the rules to transporters, so that they're just not magical things that happen, right? that pull you out of the story, and you spend all your time spinning your wheels. You're like, wait, what? Now transporters can do this. Now transporters can do that. Like, they work under very specific circumstances that they established. They didn't. They those are the kind of details that they don't care about. I don't really care whether or not they show new innovations that could push STEM forward or whatever, because like I said, it's a character study of Picard, but Picard lives 400 years in the future. They have established all these things. They're using sci-fi things like time travel, and I feel like you should get your rules down for time travel or all the other things before you start writing. If you're going to set otherwise just have the whole show. Otherwise, have the whole show in the present. Like, that, no one told them that they had to go back to the past. No one told them. No one told them. They could have just said it in the 25th century. They created a bunch of issues for themselves.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because it's like we've said before in multiple episodes before. They've done it already. They've done it in The Voyage Home, Star Trek 4. They've done it in First Contact, and a lot of the beats are very similar to First Contact in this season 2. The Borg is the antagonist and all that type of stuff, but also the fact that I think even some of the music, toward the end, was very First Contact music. Actually, I some of the beats of the musical beats were very First Contact, and so it's yes, it's great that you are trying to re-explore that. Fine, all right, but you're not presenting anything new, and that was one of the gripes that I had earlier in the season. Is like, you're just rehashing things, and whether or not did you even watch these things? Like, hello, writers, did you watch any of the old stuff? It doesn't seem, and like, it seems as though I think I saw somewhere online where it's like you probably passed this assignment off to like an intern or like some intern to say, hey, intern, please watch TNG. Please watch First Contact and give me a book report about that. And then they're like, oh, okay. This is the they did something here on time travel. That's great. Let's just write that. And then come back to the writer, to the head, to whoever it is, and say, hey, did this really cool thing about time travel with the Borg from First Contact. Maybe we should use that again. Yeah, we should use that again. So it's like You didn't even really watch it, did you? You didn't really care about it. You just kind of like took the notes from the intern and just said, here we go. Oh, this is really cool. We'll just put it in there.
So I don't know if I'm feeling generous because I saw Strange New Worlds today. But probably I am. I don't think that these people don't understand Star Trek because Discovery exists, and that show is good. And I just saw Strange New Worlds, and that episode was good. And the showrunner for Strange New Worlds is the same showrunner for this show. I think they actually do care. I think they have actually watched quite a bit of Star Trek. They also have a woman who specifically is responsible for keeping canon straight. And I know this from previous interviews. What I think happened here is that the Paramount, CBS, Viacom told them they had to make 10 episodes. And they didn't have 10 episodes worth of story. But they were told that they have to do it. And they did it so that Viacom could keep people subscribed to the service until the next Star Trek thing came out. And specifically Akiva Goldsman, who I think, like I said, understands Trek. The job that he wanted was a Pike show. When Kurtzman brought him on, that's the job he wanted to do. The job that he was given was Picard. So he was just doing the job that he was given until he could do the job that he wanted. So that I think that's what happened.
Honestly, if it's like that, you should find someone that actually knows some of the lore of TNG. Like there are plenty of people that are out there that can actually do that because they're actually people that are big fans of the show of TNG. I know many of my friends, my own brother, who knows TNG back and forth, like forwards and backwards and all that type of. I'm not saying like they should be the writers, but all I'm saying is that there has to be someone in CBS Viacom that knows and cares about that to really hone in on that story.
I think the other part of
I think they were trying to do something different, and that's where they couldn't. To Nathaniel's point, like it's not that they don't know or they don't care. I think they were trying to do something different, and that's where they sort of fell down. Because I think this whole season, I got the feeling like they were trying to do a lot of different things, and so the sci-fi part of it was just not critical, right? Like, yes, these are people from the future; they're using advanced tech, but that's not really the story that they're trying to tell. Like, this is a very different type of Star Trek. And I think they just don't have it's not in their wheelhouse to tell this type of story, right? I think is what sort of
I think that they the
things get jumbled.
They told a very straightforward sci-fi story in Strange New Worlds, so I know that they can do that. I think that all the emotional beats that they were trying to hit is where they tripped up on with themselves, trying to use some sci-fi elements to tell those emotional stories, which you can do. You can tell very compelling stories with sci-fi. That's why I love sci-fi, but they didn't deploy them. They didn't deploy them well, especially the time travel stuff. If they didn't know what they were going to do going in, they shouldn't have gone back in time. It made no sense. So I don't know. I'm being kind because I also know that like we spent 10 hours watching this, but like people spent probably 10x of that 10x of that. Yes, and another 10 hours talking about it, but the people actually creating the show probably spent 10 times that much time actually creating it. So I don't think anyone goes into situations like that trying to do poorly. I think that they just had a lot of ideas that they didn't develop well. And that's unfortunate. And part of that might have been because Akiva Goldsman was the showrunner on this show and his attention was split with Strange New Worlds, and he was more interested in Strange New Worlds in the first place.
But that's my point, is that you should have had someone else do it, because if you have the money, you have the resources, you should have someone that's really devoted to this, even though if it's a character study, we understand that. Okay, fine. But you should be tasked to like kind of say, do you really care about TNG? Because there's a lot of fans that do care about TNG, and it's almost like it's almost as though it's an insult to say like, okay, we talked about the fact that in some ways Picard is a very intriguing character, and I grew up loving Picard like a lot. Like, his stoicness, his sense of leadership, his sense of moral high ground, all that stuff. His speeches are on YouTube, and you can watch it, and like you're compelled. And like I just felt as though like this character study of Picard, great. This is to explore up how he grew up and why is he so cold and so private and things. Okay, we get that part, but I think that it just doesn't speak very well to kind of like, there's a disconnect, and it's like, do you really care? It's like, no, not really. You cared, you cared when it was like, oh, with Q. Okay, with Q and Picard. Oh yeah, that was actually from TNG. That was not from this show. And also, you cared when Wesley Crusher showed up. Oh, you really cared about that. And when Data died. Oh yeah, why? Because they've already established that. You cared when they had Riker and Troy there. Why? Because Riker and Troy are very close. And that the one thing that really got me was actually back in season 1. When Riker came to save the day, with the Romulans and stuff like that, he gave him the whole full fleet and stuff like that. I can watch that over and over again because they've established that relationship. He said at the end, he said something about like, thank you for having my back all these times, and he said, I learned from the best, and I'm like, my God, that's so good, because it's
again, that rests
yeah.
on your affinity or your love for the original TNG stuff.
Exactly.
They could have spent the last 2 seasons making you care about Rafi and Rios,
sure,
and Elnor and Soji just as much as you care about those TNG characters, and they didn't. They squandered 20 hours of television where you could have while having Picard's story.
I think just trying to do, there was just too much, because it does. I mean, to your point, Colin, like, it's been great to see these characters that we grew up watching return, right? Like, that's been a part of the excitement. But now you're also seeing like new people come in, and they're just not doing much with them. And so you're like, well, I want to care of, like, because now like you're expanding the Star Trek family, but not really doing much with that family, right? So it's like, so while it's cool to see, okay, this is Picard in his later years, Riker, Troy, and now we're gonna see more of the TNG cast in season 3.
You're going to have even less time for them, and I mean, and you cut Rios out, which I won't say anything else. Otherwise I'll start going down. and you made Jurati a Borg. So I mean, the ability to actually develop them as characters is gone. So now all you have is Rafi, Elnor, and Soji. I mean, Seven is an existing character. Whatever feelings you have about Seven, you had almost like 4 years to develop those feelings.
Right.
So she doesn't count. You only have like 3 characters now that have to fight for screen time with like another 5 characters that they're going to add next season. So
yeah. It's funny when you mentioned season 3 is that they said Brent Spiner is going to be back. So I was wondering what, Data's dead. So are they doing before? Are they doing that?
No. They're just going to do a Soong.
God, it's so annoying. Please don't do that.
They're just
I
gonna.
hope not.
They're probably just gonna have another Soong because Soji is still there, right? So and she's still an android. So I think they're just gonna have another Soong. Probably the Soong that created Soji. Is who you'll see pop up in this in season 3. Because Brett Spiner Brett Spiner has said for years that he's too old to play Data. Or he's too old to play B4 too. Unless they're going to spend a lot of money on de-aging, like Disney did for Luke. And I doubt they're going to do that. So.
Yeah, and then one more thing is that I think what you mentioned about Condra, about Star Trek, like with this, Star Wars had the same problem. So in terms of incorporating their new characters and letting them kind of breathe and letting them actually people caring about them, and it's always a conflict when you have such rich and nostalgic type of shows, and people really do love it to really care about new characters. And in some ways,
I don't know. Like I said, I care about Michael. I care about Saru. I care about.
No, I'm talking about like from the standpoint of like you're basing it off of like nostalgic type of things, like what I talked about with Star Wars, and I know that Discovery is kind of different in a different manner. It's different that way. I'm talking about like if you're in Picard, you're established, you have this new cast of characters, and then why is it that you have basically have had not much interaction with with your old folks, things like that, with your old crew from the Enterprise.
Yeah. So I saw something that did this very well recently. Scream, the recent Scream movie. So what you're talking about is a requel, and in Scream tradition, they actually explain this in the movie in a very meta way. So like when you're using established characters and then bringing in new characters or whatever, and they actually do it very well in Scream, the newest Scream. And they balance the new characters just as well as the old characters. Yeah, they didn't do that very well in The Force Awakens. They didn't do that very well in Picard. But it can be done very well because they just did it very well in Scream. So it's possible. You can have the fan favorite characters from the past and give them something to do that's substantial while establishing why you should like the new characters. But right. They didn't really do that. And like I said, I do like Michael, I do like Saru, and I like everyone else on that thing, on that ship. But honestly, you're not bringing back the actor. It's not like you're bringing back Leonard Nimoy. You're bringing back the character. So if you're connected with the Discovery crew, it's not because of your connection with Spock. It's mostly because of their actually putting in the work for you to care about the Discovery crew. And bridging the gap between the old cast and the new cast is what they just haven't figured out in a lot of these requels.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. What else do we want to talk about? Or we've been talking.
I think it's just the end of the show.
Picard,
where when they get back to their present time, and realize that the Borg Queen is Jurati, and she wants to join the Federation, and now there's a new threat, right? Like there's a galactic threat now, and they sort of just cede control to the Borg Queen. She's already figured out how to. What did
galactic
they call it?
Event.
Was it?
That's what they call it.
Oh no! Like the energy thing. I forget what they called it. That was about
I can find it here. Jurati, and then
she says something. I think.
If we don't act, we're going to die. His neutrino emission a massive spike in neutrino emissions. Focus on the center of the quadrant. It wasn't very clear.
Yeah, and it's basically about to blow. So her Borg ship, and the fleet have
Right.
to harmonize
So,
their shields to absorb that energy and prevent the destruction of that sector, right? So
mhm.
you have this moment where they all come together, the new friend, and we see the surprise that he
Mhm.
brought Elnor back, which I was relieved, because I was like, I think he was a favorite in the first season, right? Like a crowd and audience favorite, and then he dies
Yeah,
in the
because they had
second
nothing for him to do
episode,
this season.
first
Like,
episode.
and they
Yeah,
should and they should they
right. And then you see him as a hologram, and you remember why you liked him, right? Part of
mhm.
the reason why you liked him, and so yeah, it's like nice to see him brought back, and hopefully there's more use for him, and they explore. Because I also think that relationship with him and Rafi, like, because she
Mhm.
lost her family basically when
Her son, yeah.
uh
Because
like her life,
went down a conspiracy a rabbit hole, and she ended up
right,
being right about her conspiracy, but she still lost her son. Yeah.
exactly. Right, she still lost her son, and sort of this Elnor, I see as sort of a chance for her um to have that is like a similar type of relationship, right? Like she sees him as her son, her mentee, or whatever, right? And so I think that even that could have, like, you sort of see it a little bit here, where she obviously cares for him. She's having hallucinations about him. She's upset at Picard initially, but even that just sort of melts away pretty quickly over his death. And so yeah, so I mean, hopefully they explore that a little bit more in the next season. I don't know
Yeah.
what's gonna happen,
I doubt it.
but yeah,
They
They're just gonna
have
go full
but yeah,
TNG.
so they have a different
right.
showrunner next season. So
Oh, they're just gonna go full TNG.
they have a different showrunner next season. So they
So
won't have the same. They might have different issues next season, but they won't have the
Yeah.
same. They won't have the same issues of like
yeah,
Akiva Goldsman splitting his time between this show and the Strange New World show. And I think they definitely need a strong. They needed a stronger hand in the writers' room. I I don't blame the writers who wrote all these episodes, because I mean he writes the showrunner usually writes the first and the last episode, and he has the scaffolding of the season, and then the writers fill things in. I think all of these writers were probably less experienced writers, and probably why things didn't connect as well as they should have been, and they needed a supervisor, and he was a very poor supervisor because his attention was split. So hopefully that won't be an issue in the next season.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because now there's an entirely
Right.
new threat on the horizon, and then managing this whole
Mm-hmm.
relationship with the board, right? Because, and I guess that maybe that'll answer your question, like what is the nature of this board? What happened to the decades of history that we had with the old board? Like, how does this fit in? And how do they, like, what's going to happen, right? Because obviously, I mean, she seems to be there to
Yeah,
help.
she wants to join.
Right?
She wants to join the
But
Federation,
our
which is
experience with the
very
board,
unborg like. Yeah.
yeah, right. But past experience with the board tells you that you can't really
Mm-hmm.
trust them, right? So working
And
all of that out,
she's
and
now like 400 years old. So
yeah,
like
7.
the person that they knew is somewhat is even if she was just like a human that happened to live or figured out a way to live 400 years. In pretty much every story where you see it, like long-lived humans, they become detached from humanity. She lost her humanity. Plus, she's 400 years old. So yeah, it's possible that they're trusting her, but they probably shouldn't trust her for some reasons. It's unclear.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, and then I guess I forgot about Laris. We'll have, I guess, a relationship between him and Laris next season as well.
Yeah.
Because they wanted the. Anyway, I'm not going to say anymore, but the fact that they
He's gonna give him a second
Yes,
chance.
give him a second
and
chance.
they're gonna go off
maybe
and have sex.
Exactly.
maybe they'll give him. She'll give
On
him.
on the Enterprise F. I think it's on the Enterprise F probably.
Uh,
Now it's
I think
probably
the-
Enterprise F
No, the Enterprise
or E.
E. It's E.
Okay.
I don't know who the captain is going to be. Maybe Worf. They had to make a decision
Worf
about
has to be
how
Worf.
they're going to do his makeup if he's going to show up next season. I think that's a minor thing. I think it's more. I don't really care what makeup he has. I actually would prefer that they keep it consistent and have him have the Discovery makeup. But what I'm most interested in is him being captain of the Enterprise now.
Yes, he should be.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Especially since like Riker was never going to be the captain of the Enterprise. He actually was the captain of the Titan for a while. And actually, if you watch Lower Decks, he was the captain of the Titan for a while before he retired for a bit. So yeah, I guess we'll see everyone next season at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. Did we miss anything in the episode? I mean, this is the very end of the episode, but like I think we talked this through. I don't know if we need to. I feel like every week we've been sort of doing an autopsy of the show and trying to understand why it's not working properly. So unlike Discovery or probably Strange New Worlds, when we might do a season wrap up episode, I don't know if we need another one because I feel like we've talked at length about the issues with this season every single time that we talk about this season. Actually, all these conversations tend to run like at least like an hour 15, an hour 30 minutes talking about the issues. So I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. If there's nothing else, we want to hear what you guys think, and we will see you next week when we start talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. But please comment down below with your own gripes or praises about the season. Join the conversation and like and subscribe to get more content like this. And we will see you next time. All right, guys. Thanks.